Hello, Renaissance artists. I am Jessica Henry, and I am anxious and excited to welcome you to our first lesson of our brand new year 2 with the Renaissance Academy. So today, this first module, we're going to be working mostly from life. I want to do these first few lessons on drawing from life. So what we're going to do is we're going to go out in nature and do some sketches just from looking at trees and just get a flavor for, just really observing things on that nature. So what I'm going to do before we head out is I'm going to show you some examples that I've done, and you'll see what we're going from here. All you're going to need for this first lesson is some sort of a sketchbook. And I like these little ones like this. They have the little strap, and this one's upside down. And they're just nice. I actually bought this one specifically because it had the heavier paper. It's, I believe it's 90 pound, which is nice. You can still do a little tiny bit of watercolor on it, just a little. And I did put a little bit of gesso, clear acrylic gesso on some of these pages if I wanted to do a little bit of oil painting. You don't have to, but it's there. And then I also have, they come in all sorts of different sizes, styles, and even colors of pages. This is an older one. There's a magnet in here that kind of keeps it shut. They usually come with some sort of nice bookmarker. This one I like, especially because it has this really cool leather, but it also has toned paper. So you can add a little bit of white to the image, and it really kind of pops out like that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour of some of these that I've done. You like the smaller size book so that you can take it in your bag or whatever and just whip it out and do some sketches. And wherever you are, these are basically just, it's almost like a journal entry of sketches, and you can adapt them to whatever suits your life. For example, in this one down here, when I was a teenager and going to the atelier, late 1920, the art museum was really close to the school where I attended the atelier. And so I would go late at night and just draw from, actually this was drawn from life, this was one of my horses, but I would draw from the paintings there. And that is something that really just kind of works when you're in an area where it's a colder environment. So this is from the Lucretia, a Rembrandt painting. This is from a sculpture at the art museum. These are from Minneapolis Institute of Arts. And, just drawing there, sketching to try to get some of the basic form. Always working from life is the best way to truly learn to see. This was a very big marble sculpture. Loved trying to catch this overall gesture of the man fainting into the angel's arms. This was a really big, well, she's about life size, and it's a light or lamppost. Edgar Degas horse. So going to art museums in the winter is really one of the best solutions to cold weather, working from life drawings. These are from a sculpture called The Three Graces. They were all holding hands. This is one of them. This is a sculpture of the Veiled Lady, sculpted out of, or carved out of white marble. And then I'll do, well, this was a sculpture that I loved, this solid form of shadow along her arm and coming up like this. It had a nice feel. So these are more of my museum sketches. And this one is keeping it away from your kids. I was studying my hand from above and just observing negative space in between the fingers. And you can take a complicated object like a hand or whatever, and just by observing negative space, it becomes a little bit more simplified. And my child, of course, when they were toddlers, decorated the picture too. This was a tree root example, the tree coming down that I had done a number of years ago, plein air. And so that is the last workbook over here that I'm going to show you. So in today's lesson, I'm going to demonstrate this picture. And we're going to go out and just draw from nature and how to observe the different angles and so forth. And you'll watch me create this drawing. I come back to the studio and add these white highlights later. Even in your home, you can do some smaller sketches. These are some that I've done here in my home just from dried foliage from out in my yard. I just grabbed some different weeds and things and bring them inside, and a little bit of observation there. Before we head out into nature, I want to take some time and talk about pencil strokes a little bit first so that you have some ideas of how to make different textures and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about just holding your pencil and different common pencil strokes that we use in regular drawing. So this is a 4B pencil, and I have sharpened it back a bit. And it's not really super sharp, but it's enough. I don't want a really sharp point because what I want to do here at this point is start getting the texture. When I'm trying to get a mass along the shaded side of a tree or rock, I will often use a 45-degree angle shadowed line. And I keep them about like this. Now, you don't want to do this as much because what happens is you get a darker deposit in the edges. It's okay to use that if you're massing in a very large area in the background and you want just a light value over it. So learn how to handle some of your pencil strokes in this way so that you can get uniformity from top to bottom as much as possible. You can always go back through with a little stroke to lift in a little value, or you can take your kneaded eraser and lift out a little bit if you need to. All right, so, but in general, when I want to show line work on a tree trunk or on a face, a shadow, whatever, I use a 45-degree angle line. Now, if you are left-handed, instead of going this direction from lower left to upper right, if you're left-handed, they go the opposite direction. And you can study the works of Leonardo da Vinci to see how he was left-handed and his strokes all go this way. Okay, so you're gonna go this way if you're right-handed. Now, say you're doing a tree trunk and you have where it's shadowed on this side and it turns and goes towards the light. I might alter my 45-degree angle and go upwards a little to reflect the changing form. Thinking about it sort of like paintbrush strokes, allowing it to show the form of something. Now you can see I've turned my angle and I'm going to go towards the light. So now I'm going to do fewer lines and then maybe even fewer still. So you kind of start to get this feeling that this is showing form. And to make an area a little bit darker, you just go over it again. Let's alter the angle a little bit as you round the form, just like that. Another thing you want to pay attention to when you're working on your drawing is to not start in the lower corner, but to start in the upper corner. You can sketch out your layout where you want everything to go like this, but as you start working in the values and form, start in the upper corner and then work your way down. If you start down here and work your way up, you will smear all this. Now, sometimes that's inevitable. What you can do is you take a piece of scratch paper and put it under your hand to continue working. That way your hand isn't going to smear, and then you can just move it and alter it as you need to. All right, now in the video where I'm drawing the tree trunk, I demonstrate some texture. So I'll show you how I get the texture in some of that. So let's just take this as our tree trunk here. What I do to do that is I just do some very tiny little squiggles like this. And I'm not pressing hard. Occasionally I press a little bit more and then I press a little bit lighter to get a variety within that area. So some of it's darker, showing a deeper part of the texture of the tree's bark, and some is lighter, showing the highlights. So I'm all the time thinking about the direction that the bark is going to be growing in along the tree. And a lot of different trees have different kinds of bark. So just pay careful observation to that. And sometimes it's very smooth. If you're doing a birch tree or aspen, what you end up with is more like a soft shadow, like this. And then an occasional eye on the tree bark. It's a little darker value. Like that. Just a little slit in that. Some of these lines that kind of go across the birch tree that show that the form of it. Like that. And keep the shadow over here. Okay, another thing I want to call to your attention that's kind of hard to see in one of the videos is the way that the branches grow. So as they come out of a tree, they have sort of an angular, they usually always are tipped upwards, and then they branch off. As they branch, they get smaller and smaller as they grow away from the trunk. So what you have is a series of Ys. It's the letter Y. So down here, the Y is bigger and darker and stronger. You can see there's a letter Y. And then they like to overlap each other. Now, this is another one of the areas too where you have to pay careful observation because not all tree branches grow in the same Y-like pattern. So you can see too, I'm varying the pressure that I apply on my pencil strokes. Sometimes I press firm, and then sometimes I press lighter and firm and lighter. And you alter that line. That's called ribboning a line. See how it's like a ribbon? So that has a very interesting appeal when you're drawing even a human figure or the side of a tree. Think about what is coming forward towards you and give that a stronger line. If something is softer and rounder, it has more the feeling of it going back. So you can lighten the pressure as something might recede. Even in an arm or a physical structure, coming towards you is a stronger, sharper accent. Further away is less. Okay. Now, I want to take a little bit of time and talk to you about drawing some foliage. You might have rocks or leaves or grass or twigs, whatever, around the base of a tree if you're going to be working on a tree. And so to do some of that, there's a lot of shorter strokes and longer strokes. And again, like when we did the tree bark over here, some of it is darker accents and some is lighter, which gives it texture and variety. And sometimes there's seed pods at the top of the grasses. You can just suggest with the slightest little bit of squiggling. And as you get towards the bottom where the grass touches the earth, it's sort of, you have shorter strokes because there's a shorter kind of grass or leaves or rocks or whatever down here. So you can alter your pencil stroke like this. And all the time I'm trying to think about creating a mass in this area that is more like a value rather than linear details, lines, lines, lines. Instead, by holding your pencil to the side like this, it's more, you have a softer tip on the pencil, so you're creating more of a shadowy mass, which allows more for the imagination to kind of get in here. And you know, you don't really know everything that's going on. We don't need all the detail and information, but it's interesting enough that we feel that there's grass and leaves and maybe little frogs and mushrooms living in here and things like that. So you'd have your trees coming up. And the further away things get in your background, the softer and more diffused the light is. So don't give your far away trees or grasses or whatever a darker value. Just keep them lighter and less information. So here would be a background tree. And then this one in the foreground is going to be a little bit sharper and stronger, like this. And see how by making this tree a little bit more pronounced, that one becomes even less. And let's put one way back here, even softer and lighter, skinnier, smaller. And then here's the base of this one. So you can adjust it that way as well. Okay, so here just in a few minutes we created the illusion of a little, you know, garden or grassy area next to a tree. Let's give it some shadow here on this side. It's a nice form. And there we have a little forest scene. Okay, so now I want to take some time and just talk about some common tree shapes that we see often. And I'm going to do some sketches in my book here and just kind of break down the basic form of the trees that we see all the time. Now, before I get into drawing actual shapes of the trees, I want to talk to you real quick about drawing foliage for the trees. In some cases, we have trees that have, so you may have trees with no foliage, or you have some with just a little. So what I always try to do is to start out with something of the form of the tree, and this is just a really small little sketch. So I'll just do a little one here. And then you can give it some confines of masses. So I'm giving it sort of the boundaries of where some foliage would live within here. And then I'm going to take the side of my pencil and put a shade over where it should have some sort of foliage. Just using the side of my pencil. And then I can come back in through here, applying a little bit more pressure and just massing in a little bit more where it should be darker values, just upon observation of where the tree might have the areas. If you squint down at the tree, instead of seeing every little leaf, you'll start to see the value masses. Of course, the light's always strongest at the top, and it cascades to lighter at the bottom, or darker at the bottom, because less light is hitting it. So I am using a little bit more of the angle at the end of the brush, or the pencil, just to get some of those squiggly, darker values down here. You can always pull out some sky holes as you get closer to the top too if you want. Just use your kneaded eraser for that. Just pop in a few places where the sky's gonna peek through. You can put a branch in there, whatever. I can't think of anything more relaxing than to sit and study trees and the way they grow and all their little nuances and the strength of their arms and as they reach out and how the arms sort of snake and branch around each other. And you have some coming this way and some ducking under this way. So you can play with some of those shadows a little bit. Sometimes I just go and do a branch study, and it doesn't matter if no one else understands what it is I'm doing. If I know that you know, I've been studying branches and that's what these are, what happens is you're learning, you're all the time educating your mind with the way that they grow, trees, branches, how things interact with each other. All right, on the next few pages, I'm going to talk to you about the basic shapes of some common trees. So I'm going to start with the oak. And for this, I'm just going to, if you look at an oak tree, they typically have larger masses of leaves that are big and bulky, solid tree trunks coming up. And again, this is all, you know, going to be just a big mass in here. Piles upon piles of the oak tree. And then all of their branches holding these up. So if we have a branch coming up like this, make sure that those look like they connect in here. Split this and give this one an arm going up this way. oak trees tend to have very strong senses of angles. Not a lot of curves on an oak tree. Very straightforward. Get to know the characters of the trees that are around your area. Okay, now I'm going to mass in some of this value here. Let's just apply a nice thin value over this. Notice I'm lightening the pressure of my pencil as it approaches the top of the tree. As I come back underneath here, I can darken this a little bit more. I'm going to darken these tree branches too, with shorter strokes. All the time thinking about the form and the structure and the angle of how these grow. Put some value on this leaf mass. So originally you saw that I had loosely masked in where my drawing is going to go on here, and then I came back over the top of that and worked in the detail, starting at the top, working my way down. All right, so now I'm going to come back over the top again and just work out some of the contouring a little bit more. And that's just with a few little squiggles here and there. And instantly, your leaf masses can then have all kinds of character and shape to them, and like this. Like that. So I'll do a little bit more on this, then I'm going to move on to a different tree. But I do like how you can take and just alter your lines. Press hard, press light, press hard, press light. And squiggle this way and that way and give it a lot of character. Now these I'm taking from different books and examples, but you can go out in nature and really do this from life. But I just wanted to give you sort of an idea of where to go with some of these different designs of trees. Especially as you get into plein air painting, you're going to want to have this understanding already in place. Okay, so that is a basic oak tree. Okay. All right, an apple tree, or actually a lot of fruit trees, but we'll go with an apple tree, often grows lower and flatter. So they kind of come out of the ground at something of an angle and turn, and the overall leaf shape of the apple tree is something like this. Okay, so you can apply a mass in general for the leaves. like that. And go down the trunk, just unite everything, make it connect. Let's give it a shadow under it too. I always try to think about the tree being one with the earth, and I used to really struggle with how to get the tree roots to look like they're attached, but if you can more or less do what you can to forget about the separation and show connection where you can, it's going to have more of that element of realism. Okay, so I'm putting a little bit darker value now behind and under the foliage here. I'm going to use shorter pencil strokes too now as I'm working towards the top of the tree and thinking about the masses of leaves. So you can alter your shading lines too. All right, now I'm going to do a little bit of work on the trunk and just pull out some of the detail and information in a tree trunk as I'm thinking about the apple trees. These wonderful arms and branches that reach way out from fruit trees. And then you can add some shorter leaf pieces around the edge. You can see I'm just making little tiny squiggly squiggles here, letting it curl and go up into the light and just soften all that in there. I'm going to darken some of these branches. You can take your eraser too and pull out some light hitting some of these branches if you want a little bit of variety in there, like that. And then we'll darken the leaves around those so they really stand out. Again, if you feel so inclined, you can do little leafy things around the contour. You can even add sticks that are growing above and beyond the confines of the tree. Just a few. Okay, so that's fine for an apple tree. All right, now an elm tree, they grow more like fountains. If you've ever observed the way an elm tree grows, their roots start at the bottom and then they just explode at the top like they're just glad to be alive. It's so pretty. They're usually pretty straight. And then I'll give it a little bit of a mass for the leaves. You kind of have this down the sides like this, like they just sprung forth like a fountain. All right, so once you get the general bone structure in place and then you've masked in a value, you can come back through then and just like we've been doing, put in a little bit more detail. We're connected, always connected to the ground. As we come up, we've got the main components of the tree coming up like this. And then I'll add some darker value in here where I feel it should be most prevalent. So you definitely want to familiarize yourself with whatever kind of trees you have in your area. And you can Google images very easily and just set it up on your laptop and do some sketches, get familiar with the trees, what they look like with leaves and then without. Because they sure change their faces when they don't have the leaves that we're used to seeing. Okay, so the weeping willow, typically like the apple tree, the wood of a willow tree is very soft. So they tend to grow a little bit crooked. And so we're going to give our willow here a little bit of a angle. And then so much of it we don't even see. So we're going to give it the sort of a structure in here. And then I'll mass in the typical way that we'll just make a young one here. Of course, if you were going to make a big old willow, they're almost more like a gigantic marshmallow or mushroom or something like that. So I'm thinking too about these masses. So we've got a one round mass like this. This one can come up this way. And this mass comes here. So inside here, the bone structure would be something like this, with the branches coming out this way. We can't really see them, so we're just going to do a lot of suggestion here. So I'm going to give it a value over it. And this one's out in front, so it's going to be a little bit lighter. And I'm going to put a value over this tree trunk. Willow bark is really textured, so we're going to give it some texture here. The grasses right down here along the foot of the tree. Always shadows under the willow. Okay, so there's a value over that one. Let's tuck a darker mass here and then let that fade to light. Go darker here as the masses tuck into each other, they're darker. And as they fade to the light, lighter. And this one's at the top, so it's going to be really light. So now, coming back down here, I'm going to start mapping in some of the darker areas where branches are cascading out, leaves, and so forth. You can erase some of your foundational massing and shapes just because they were there to help. We don't need this still. Think about individual little tendrils as they come down on the outside contour here. It's jumping ahead of myself. Come back here and give this the time it needs. If I was out in nature drawing a willow, I would be taking a lot more time than what I'm doing here. This is just to kind of give you an understanding of the basic structure. And let some of them overlap. Let's go a little bit less than that. So this is sort of the phase 2 of this drawing. What I would do next is to sort of erase out some highlights and to pull in a little bit more information because I'm just massing it in. So now I can come back through and pull out a few key just suggestions that make it really feel more like a willow. And remember too, you can always give a sense of scale, how big a tree really looks when you put someone or something recognizable with it. So if I'm drawing this tree and I want to make it look really big, I can draw, you know, a little cow under here, or a horse, whatever. Let's make it a horse. And all of a sudden that tree has become huge, okay? And so by just suggesting a few of the branches like this that are overlapping and sort of doing their willow thing, okay, it's a willow. And the last tree I want to demonstrate is one of my favorites. It is the birch. And so they are just, you just kind of begin with this beautiful, graceful trunk. They're not quite straight, but they have this soft, gentle curve, typically, to their form. And their branches are very slender as they don't reach out sort of wild like an oak, but they just are graceful this way. You could put a branch back there. Okay, so I'm just going to take that as my solid structure and mass in around that a little bit more. Let's give it a few more. Give it some branches over here, massing in leaves. And birches too have this almost fountain-like effect. The way they grow straight up and then just sort of like a fireworks. They just sort of have this wonderful raining-like quality of the leaves as they come down. definitely take some time. And even if it's cold outside, you can just sit in your car and get out there and study the different tree shapes. So as I get over to the edge now, I'm just doing some smaller little strokes with the pencil, like that. Okay, now I'm going to come back through here and put in a little bit more information on this tree trunk. Just using smooth strokes like this. Then I can do a few gentle shading lines. Just suggest some more branches in here. And their leaves are not like dark solid masses like they are on the oak tree. They're more delicate and airy. So you can see more of the branches on the oak or the birch inside the foliage. So I'm just sketching in sort of the way they grow. Lots of little Ys as they come off the main body of the trunk. Okay. All right, now I'm going to draw some of the information on the trunk itself. So I had mentioned that the birch tree at the beginning has these sort of gentle, darker curves coming this way, lines reflecting that paper. Sort of an eye every now and then. Aspen trees get darker at the bottom. So you can sort of turn it into an aspen like that if you want. Okay, and then I'm going to come back through here and do some little leafy details. So if you wanted to take the time on your study and just sort of suggest all these little tiny leaves, you can do that too. But remember, you have the solid mass in first. That way you don't have to draw every leaf. It's not about drawing every leaf on the tree, but about capturing the personality of the tree. So if you draw the basic bone structure in, then mass in the basic shape of the leaf mass, and then you come back through and then add some more of the little details if you want. These, you can go all the way in and take the time and do all that. One thing I want to show you too that you can do is to take your white pencil, if you have one, and just pull out some of these white aspects if you're doing a birch, like that. That's a lot of fun. Let's get going. And today we are out in nature. I love this time of year for really getting in there and studying trees because there are, as you can see, no leaves on the trees. So one of my most favorite things about getting out here when it starts to kind of warm up a little bit is to just get in and study the way that the trees actually grow. Many times I think we take for granted that we understand trees, but it's really by careful study and observation that we get to know them personally. And when you start to really understand how they grow and how their branches interact with each other, then you really start putting that into your art. And so today, my focus is going to be doing some in-depth studies of tree roots and just some basic shapes of some of the trees. So that is where I'm going with today's lesson. All right, so things I take with me. I'm actually sitting on a little tiny fold-out tripod stool, and I love it because I can fold it up tight and it's got a little Velcro strap, and I just sling it over my shoulder or strap it to the outside of my plein air backpack. I have today, I didn't bring much in my backpack. I have some books I wanted to study in here, which takes up most of my weight. But I also have just one pencil. This is a mechanical pencil and it has a B lead in it. And I have the appropriate pencil sharpener for that, as well as just an eraser. Kind of the kind that you fit on your school pencil. It's fine, no big deal. Sometimes I may not even bring one at all. And I just put it right on my mechanical pencil like that. So I'm going to set those down and I'll show you what else I have. And this is a nice little backpack. You can find, you don't need really big ones, just a small one. These are the books that I want to study, so I'll get these out. This is an antique book, so I keep it in a separate bag. This is another one that you might enjoy. It's called The Zen of Seeing. I picked this up off of Amazon for just, I think it was $6. And so this is really interesting. It's all handwritten, but it really breaks down it just takes apart that peaceful feeling that you get when you're out in nature, and how to just take those ideas from your head and put them on paper. I'm going to explore more of this, and I encourage you to look into that too. And then I have my drawing book. All right, so you can pick these up at Barnes & Noble or art stores or anything like that. And I prefer the kind with no lines. Okay, so I have it just basic lines. And because it's toned a little bit, if you want, you can bring your highlighter pencils and as well as your darker ones, and come up with some interesting drawings that way. All right, so let's jump in. Okay, so I'm going to focus on some of this tree trunk here and the roots just a little bit, maybe even just a part where the this root branch here comes up and meets the tree, and I'm going to hold it here. You won't be able to see the rest of the tree because I'm going to try to squeeze it all in my camera frame here. So when you get to a place, you just want to take in what it is about an object or something that really moves you. And I've always loved this tree trunk as it's just barely holding on. And so I'm going to sketch some of that. I'm keeping my pencil loose. One of the nice things too about doing some of these more intimate studies is that you're not committed to doing the entire tree. You're just doing a part of it that really moves you for whatever reason. Something about it that just speaks to you. So I'm keeping sort of a non-committal approach to this that is just suggested. I'm keeping my, you can see my pencil strokes are very loose. But I do want to find out what it is that makes it have this appearance as such. Looking for straight lines. I'll be getting some accents in there. And I'll pull out some of these darker, I want this river back here. When I come to areas that I really want to be the darkest on this tree, I'm going to press more firm. You could get a different pencil, like a B, and see if you can push that even, like a dark B. This is a B, but I think it's just a regular B. If you wanted to get, you know, like a 9B or even a 6B, you could do that too, to really get those sharper and stronger in there. I like the way that this underside of the root of the tree here has this curved cave-like feeling in here. So I want to try to convey that with some of the penciled marks, and the lines are directional like that. Make this even darker back in here. So some nice strong sharp shadows in here. Pull this up in here and get some of this texture, this tree trunk. So I'm trying to hold my paper so there's not a glare on it. And to get some of that tree texture, what I do is I just kind of do some of these jittery little, just like this. And then we'll go over it with a value layer like that. And we'll just gently pull this mark right up like that. Give it a sense of weight. I'm anchoring that back there. But I want this to have a stronger feeling of being in front of that. So I'm going to make this even sharper. Like that, and then it'll come around like an arm this way. And so the direction of the texture of this tree trunk comes towards me this way, and I really want to play with some of that. I've got a part here where I guess at one time these were two different branches, but they grew together, so we'll give that a little bit of a trench in there. I'm going to give it a little value first to kind of sculpt out the form of this, like that. And then I'll add some textural indications this way. Sometimes I find it helps if you're a little bit cold, because then you can shiver a little. And you get some of that texture showing through. Indicate that a little bit that way. I also want to sort of convey the feeling that this is, the root of this is right on the beach, the sandy shore of this river. So we'll get some of these indication of little erosion from this water. It kind of melts away. It sort of tells a story too, that this tree has been dealing with this water erosion so long that it has loosened its roots and is now finally about to meet the water personally. So let's give these little erosion banks some shadow and form. Love this, getting up close to nature like this. This is just wonderful. It's so peaceful too. So just let some of this do its thing that way. And this goes under here a little bit too. So back to the tree trunk. You have to be patient with drawings like this because for a long time they may not look like anything. And you just have to keep plowing forward and know that you know what it is and the story it's going to tell. And allow yourself the time to play and sculpt and figure it out. And there's these little caverns and tunnels and caves and things under these roots. So these are going to be really dark down under here. All right, so I'm going to stop filming here and work on this a little bit more, and then I'll come back and show you what I've done. Okay, so I'm just about done with this, and I'm thinking about even in a sketch like this about where I want the eye to travel, even in this. So I loved the strong branches it comes in, and the suggestion of these grabbing still to the bank here. So I kind of just wanted to play with a little bit more of this soil right here, just to really make it look like this is the earth down there. So I'm going to add just a few rocks and some leaves in here. And I'm keeping my pencil strokes horizontal to really suggest that this is flat earth down here. And then let this be dark here. And this branch here can kind of just fade off. I don't want it being a strong line going off the edge. Okay, and then this is the sand back here. So I'm going to make this look a little bit more like earth and sand. And by putting a little bit of a value right here, it separates this tree from the background. Just a little bit like that. And then I can play with some more of that sculpting out of the sand and this erosion right here. And then the water. So then I'm going to take my eraser and just kind of erase some of the water ripples in here. And I just suggested some of this background information back here just a little. I want to keep it a little bit more quiet, not really interesting. And these lines back here, I want to be thinner and less than the lines up here. Okay, so I've moved down the river just a little bit, and I am going to be drawing some of these white trees across the water, and I love the way that the white balances with the dark trees, so I'm going to try to get some of that. And I wanted to also just talk about the shapes of the trees too. So I love to observe the ways these branches interplay around each other and go in and out of dark values and light values. And some come around the front of the tree like this, and then they zip around back that way into light. And in shadow, this one has a big shadow base underneath. And allow your pencil strokes to have that choppy, angular feeling. Pause, stop, reflect. That's what nature makes us do. You have to stop, you have to slow down and really think about what you're doing and why. Because it'll tell you. I'm afraid we're really at the mercy of the sun, too, for filming when we're outdoors. But, it's kind of just the nature of the beast. So I'll come back through there and play with some more of that. And then this white one comes up in front. I want to get some of this contrast. And this one is short. It's almost stick straight. This tree has this wonderful darker passage of this branch. It curves like this. And look at the way that some of these angle up and down and curve and go down and up and angle up this way. Just make sure that you don't get them all stagnant, because that can easily happen too. And just want to double check that. Now I love this. I want to get this before these people leave, but there's people down here which really, really give the scale and size to these trees. They're down here on the shore fishing, and they're so small. Look at this compared to the trees. People doing people things. There's another tree in here. All right, well, that wraps up our first lesson of the first module of our new year of the Renaissance Academy. All right, you guys, I hope that you go ahead and fill your journals throughout this entire Renaissance year. And if you are just joining us for the drawing module, then I strongly encourage you just to go ahead and continue filling that journal throughout your life. Keep buying new ones. These are a wonderful way to chronicle your life and your thoughts, your inspiration, and you can always refer back to them for your other paintings and other projects. All right, thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.